Hello, travelers of the galaxy far, far away. I got a new army for the tabletop game Star Wars Legion that I've been working on for the past couple of weeks, and I want to share it with you all. It has a lot of personal ties to an Edge of the Empire campaign I've been running for almost 10 years now. The story of this army is directly tied to that Edge of the Empire campaign I just mentioned, and was in fact made for one of the players in the campaign, and features a large assortment of many of the other players in miniature format, which is really, really cool, I think. For those of you who don't know what Edge of the Empires is, it's a Dungeons and Dragons kind of style role-playing game set in the universe of Star Wars. It has some awesome dice system kind of involved with it that gives everyone a unique opportunity to act during whatever kind of point in the story you're in and you're actually involved rolling the dice. It's one of my favorite role-playing games, and despite being a Star Wars game, it has surprisingly just as much depth in the combat as it does in the actual role-playing. It's not an absolute just bloody combat fest the whole time. It actually has a lot of, charisma and kind of role-playing mechanics put at the front of the game with a big emphasis. It's not just all about combat, which I think most people would assume with a Star Wars game. But anyways, this campaign is set in the farthest reaches of the Star Wars galaxy, in an area known as the Terminus Sector. Not much is known about any of the planets in this sector, other than Mustafar, which is sort of nearby. It's on the far edge of the Terminus Sector. So I had a lot of creative freedom when it came to designing this area. I did go on the Wikipedia page, checked what little notes people had given on some of the planets. Maybe a character made a shout out, or it's kind of mentioned in a comic book or something. And I tried to incorporate those things into there. And once I did that, I got to actually really designing the meat and potatoes of the planets, making the fauna, creatures, maps, and then making all the NPCs and the factions. And what we have today is going to be one of those factions. They are known as the Blades, and no relation to the Elder Scroll faction, I swear. So the Blades used to all originate from an isolated, uncharted little planet lost within an ever-expanding red nebula. They were a somewhat technologically stagnant group, but they were very skilled warriors, and they did kind of lack space travel, partially due to the interference the Red Nebula gave on electronic devices when they tried to leave the planet or enter into that sector. And the planet consisted of many small island chains, which had their own little warrior clans, all fighting each other in constant war and vying for territorial dominance. Now, in the greater context of the Star Wars universe here, eventually the Great Purge occurred, and there was a Jedi Knight named Servaj that had been stationed in this sector of the galaxy. And when his clones turned on him, he had to make a desperate gambit to flee them. And he went into this Red Nebula. And while he did flee his pursuers, his ship was kind of left stranded afloat in this Red Nebula. And after a long time passed and his life support systems were getting really low, a blessing occurred, and he spotted the planet that I was talking about earlier, the homeworld of the Blades ahead. And he managed to use what little systems were still operational to crash land on the planet. And after a lot of initial hostility, he became something of a warlord over the various clans. And a little bit of a corrupted one at that, because of some natural dark side energy that was embedded deep within the planet's crust. He eventually assembled a group of their planet's finest warriors, went on a quest with them to acquire an ancient Sith relic blade. It was left behind in an ancient tomb on the planet. He killed the current top clan leader, unified the group under one banner, and he called them the Blades. And eventually they built a spaceship, got off world, back to the Terminus Sector, and now they rule over it as a sort of shadowy syndicate group. Many of my characters have been recruited into the ranks of the Blades, and they all serve under Servaj. His most promising pupil is the Mad Count Papano Garbano, and that is who this army is themed around and who it's actually for. So now that you got a little bit of context here as to what I assembled and what it's supposed to be, allow me to go into the miniatures, the army itself, and what everything is actually supposed to be serving for in a standard game of Star Wars Legion. So we'll start with the big boss himself, Servage. And I already kind of went into the backstory of this guy, so we'll just kind of talk about the mini here. I took a Games Workshop, I believe it was from the Free Company Militia kit. I took one of the heads from there, put it on him, sculpted his little hair piece. But for some reason, when I was making this, I thought his sword was a lot on the bigger side, like pretty much like Guts' sword from Berserk, if you've ever read or seen the show. And yeah, I pretty much used that and then just painted it like the sword. But in hindsight, looking at the drawing and stuff, I think it's got a bit of a slimmer blade profile. So if I ever make a second one, I'll go back and redo that. But I think it looks really cool as is. And then I found a Dark Eldar captain piece, used that for the body, cut away some of the spikes and stuff, and painted it up so it looks like it's the drawing pretty much here. I gave him like a different hand and a couple of other little pieces here too. And my idea of like the little floating throne here is if you ever played the MMORPG Star Wars The Old Republic, I don't play it anymore, but I used to play it way back in the day. And they have like these little floating thrones I remember in the game there, and I always thought they were really cool. Emperor Palpatine has one of those in like the movie, and again, I just thought it seemed very fitting. That's what he's actually going to be a proxy for when you use him in the game. He would be your proxy for Emperor Palpatine. I think it makes sense. I don't think he quite has the power levels of Emperor Palpatine, but it's a cool proxy, you know? Up next, we've got the Mad Count Papano Garbano, and obviously I wanted to make sure this was a pretty cool looking mini, the main feature of this army, it really should be. So I went all out just to start with the base. I gave him like a little bit of a bird skull. There's a discarded stormtrooper helmet on the other side there. And he's got a bit of a dynamic pose hopping over a bit of a dirt mound on Terminus here. Obviously, he is a Doug, as they're known in Star Wars. If you've ever seen Phantom Menace, I assume pretty much everyone watching this must have seen Phantom Menace. And Saboba, the pod racer, he's a Doug, and that is what Count Papano is here as well. So they walk on their hands, and they use their legs as like their actual hands. It's a little bit weird. And yeah, that was a bit of a challenge to make like a cool character design for this guy, and then like the miniature itself, there aren't really a ton of miniature options when it comes to this species, so I had to kind of take one of the few things available, cut all of the limbs on it, repose them all, give him a cape, give him this like hybrid like Doug head, because I didn't notice this in the drawing, but they really do have a bit of a snout face, so like I had to extend the face out, then morph it into the Mandalorian helmet that he has, and give him all of his cool armor, his cape, and his like little custom sabers there. And one thing I thought when I was like talking to him and we were making this character and everything, he didn't start out this way. Eventually he kind of turned into this evil monstrosity that you see before you. But when we were designing the character and like working on it, I thought that the Doug species had this unique ability to use like those baton style lightsabers because of the way they grip things, and they're one of the few species I think could really take like full advantage of that style of design, and might even need it, to be honest with you, when it comes to saber combat. So I think that's pretty cool, and I managed to capture that here with his lightsabers, as you can see. And yeah, it's pretty much everything for this miniature. Really, really happy with this one, and hopefully he will be as well. Like I said, this is kind of the main centerpiece of the army. This would be a proxy for Darth Vader in the army, either commander or operative. Next up, we have Masterclass Entrepreneur, Rico Suave. This is a character that was based off a really, really brief appearance, and I think it was The Last Jedi. It was the second of the Disney movies that came out. And they were looking for this master codebreaker to get on board this ship, but they ended up missing him and getting this other guy. But anyways, the brief appearance we got of the real, like, master codebreaker was this very suave, handsome gambling man, and my friend wanted to basically base his character entirely off of that. He had like a little bit of a flower brooch and like a bit of red as well to his design, so I want to throw that into the miniature here. But yeah, pretty much just a nod to that Master Codebreaker scene. And Rico Suave is always just loaded with credits, so I did a bunch of like little golden credit chips all over his base to symbolize his vast wealth. And he's a bit of a planner, organizer guy as well, so we were strategist, should be noted too. So we figured we would use him as a general Veers proxy, but I also think if you wanted to use any of, I think they're called the capo bosses, like the Black Sun boss, the HQ like option, not the squad leader option, I think he would be really good for that as well, if you wanted to take that in the army. So a bit of a multi-purpose proxy here. And next up, we have a young hotshot Trandoshan with a penchant for demolition. He goes by the name of Kabrushk, and I'll put an emphasis as well on the fact that he's a bit on the younger side. I would say at this stage in Kabrushk's life, he's a bit of a teen. He started probably like 12, 14-year-old Trandoshan in whatever age translation that would be for us, and now he's a bit more like on the 16 to 18-year-old side. And yeah, like I say, he's got a penchant for demolition. I gave him this big grenade launcher rifle, as you can see here, and he has a pistol as well in his offhand, just in case you get too close. But I was talking to the player that runs Kabrushk, and he said, I don't know, Cam, I don't think I would use that pistol. I'd probably just shoot the grenade launcher at whatever range it was at. And that is actually pretty fitting to his character, so maybe that was a bit of an oversight on my side, keeping that pistol on him. But regardless, I think the mini's pretty cool here. The actual mini that I used was not a Trandoshan model. I liked this one, though, because it had a bit more of the younger features I pictured in a teenage Trandoshan. Bit of a like drawing here. This one's a little bit slimmer maybe than the one we got here, but yeah, he had a bit more of like the teenage features I was looking for. He had a tail though, and Trandoshans don't have tails, I believe, at least to my knowledge in Star Wars. So I had to cut the tail, sculpt over the pants, added a little bit of extra equipment to them, like little belt satchels and pockets and stuff to store things in, and then, like I said, gave him this big grenade launcher here. And that was about it for this character. Unfortunately, don't have a drawing of Kabrushk. I probably do somewhere in my big folder of Star Wars stuff, but couldn't find it for the video. And Kabrushk is supposed to be a proxy for Bosk when you're playing this in a game of Star Wars Legion. Now, this next one's a little bit on the silly side. One of my players wanted to play the world-renowned wrestling champion Butterbean. I think he's like a WWE guy. I can't quite recall. I'm not a huge wrestling guy, but he is, or at least he is enough to know who Butterbean was. And I showed up and like had a bunch of printed pictures of Butterbean the wrestler, and he was like, "This is who I am, Cam. Picture this." And I was just like, all right, I guess that's what we're doing today. So, yep, Butterbean here has lasted the test of time, I will say. Enough so that he's actually opened up his own little private, like, fighting school, like, gladiator ring. This guy's proven himself in the ring quite a few times, and as you can see from some of my drawings here, he's featured in quite a few adventures that we've been on, and to be honest, this was an easier model to make. I got a sumo model, filed down the head to get rid of like all the hair that the model had, because Butterbean's bald. Then I put a WF, I believe. Sorry, again, I'm not a huge wrestling guy. I think it's WF, like Wrestling Federation belt, championship belt buckle on him. And then we did a little survival knife and a couple of little pouches for when he's out on an adventure, just across his little sash there. Really, the main challenge of this guy was painting the miniature and just trying to get as close as possible to the actual Butterbean, and hopefully I kind of did that here. I do think the figure of Butterbean is a little bit different than this guy, but it's a pretty good representation. And if you're curious what this is going to proxy for, this is a bit on the funny side. He is going to be the fifth brother proxy in the army. We did this because fifth brother has like a ram attack ability, and our Butterbean in the role-playing game likes to do like a roll lunge attack at players, and we thought the ram ability in Legion was a good mechanical transfer to his character in the game. Now, it is a little bit silly, but I do kind of love it that the damage, you have to imagine, in a game of Star Wars Legion, the damage that Butterbean is inflicting upon you in a melee combat is the equivalent of a lightsaber. And I think that in itself, as a proxy, is hilarious. So yeah, this is the proxy for fifth brother, and it is Butterbean. Now, this next one was a bit of a quick and last minute inclusion. I ended up building all of the cast for his army, pretty much, of our players, and I can understand this. He basically didn't have anywhere to slot in more operatives or characters into this army, but, we had the whole cast, and I wanted to get one of the last players in here, and we have a Rhodian survivalist swordsman that I think he's a marauder swordsman that goes by the name of Skitter. He always wears a disguise kit, has like a backpack full of survival gear and a vibro sword on him. So I did a quick little representation here and, wanted to just fit him in here so we got the full cast. I figured if he wanted to use this for something, he could use it for Seventh Sister, maybe, as a goofy proxy. That way, he could have both of them. Maybe he won't want to run one of the other operatives we have, and that will be a better option. And that is going to be all of the operatives, HQ, and named characters, basically, that make up the lineup of this army. So now we're going to actually go into some of the units that we're going to be using. The first unit here is the one with the most personality, I would say. These are the Knights of Papano. At one point during our campaigns, Servage gave Count Papano all of these force-sensitive younglings, and he was supposed to kind of train them in the art of the saber and a little bit of the Sithly arts that he has learned over the years. But I would say this is one of the few times Count Papano has a shred of humanity still remaining in him from his old days before he became this dark monster that you see before you. And he hasn't really fully corrupted these kids. He kind of tries to keep them safe and sheltered and far away from the troubles of the galaxy in this far farm planet called Innusof on the far reaches of the Terminus sector under the watchful eye of Marshal Quaid, who's actually a good guy and just your typical frontier marshal that's, just trying his best to uphold the law in the wild reaches of the outer edges of the Star Wars galaxy. So because of that, these kids are a bit more on the neutral good side if I had to put them on a D&D alignment chart. And actually, Papano's own kid, Emilio Garbano, is featured in this unit. That's the little Doug there that you can see with the orange lightsaber and the blaster. So yeah, these kids are all kind of trained in the lightsaber art, but they're pretty young and they're not that good with them yet, and they probably would be taken out pretty easily when it comes to a combat situation. So we thought they would be a good proxy for the Royal Guard, and that might be a bit morbid having these guys as the bodyguards for Count Papano, but you gotta admit, it would be pretty hilarious on the battlefield, and I think if you're gonna run them in an army, it makes a lot of sense. The way I made these was pretty much just finding as many kit little miniatures that I had available, cutting hands, making little lightsaber hilts and then blades, and a couple of Star Wars heads were just downscaled for 3D print requests and stuff, and then I just glued them on there. Pretty easy to make, actually, if I'm being honest. Next up, we have the actual Blade Warriors here, and I made 4 squads of Blade Warriors. I only got a couple in the pictures here, but if you look throughout all the video footage, you'll see all the squads. But yeah, we have the actual Blade squads here. These are going to be your proxy for standard stormtroopers, or you could use them as snowtroopers, whatever kind of core unit you want in the Empire. I think they all are kind of similar enough. But yeah, these are supposed to be your stormtrooper proxies. So you got 3 normal guys, you have a captain miniature, you have a special weapon guy, and then I did a utility guy for each of the squads. Now, a couple of them have a droid that has a red head, an R2 unit with a red head, and I figured those ones are full of stim packs. Those will be your medical droids. I did one droid that has a golden head. He's actually in the scout trooper squad I'm going to go into in a little bit. That's going to be your repair droid. I don't actually know if scout troopers can take a personnel slot like that, but I figured, hey, if they can, I got it here. If not, he can use it in a different unit. But yeah, Golden Boy's supposed to be your repair droid. And then I've got 2 K2 units that could be used as K2s since they have that as an option now for Legion. But I figured he could just use that as some kind of special personnel if he wanted to, or an alternative for a special weapon guy if he wanted to have a different miniature for a different special weapon the stormtroopers can take. In addition to that, I also did a couple of the Blade Warriors with little probe droids coming off of them. I figured those could be your personnel special upgrades. I can't remember exactly what they're called, but there's one that can like hand out aim tokens, and I thought like that's kind of a cool representation of that. You got the probe droid going out, feeding aim tokens basically to the squad, and like there's your representation. So yeah, that is the gist of what these guys are supposed to be. The actual way that I made these was buying a bunch of these alien samurai Tau warriors basically for 40k, but they were Tau, and they are cool. Tau could be like Duros, I think, in Star Wars, but I wanted to cut the heads on these guys. Tau don't have like human legs. I wasn't opposed to have a couple of alien Blade Warriors, but majority of them I wanted to be a bit more humanoid, so I had to cut the legs, cut a lot of the arms, get rid of like their Tau, I don't remember what they're called, but like their fire guns or whatever they are. Give them new weapons that are a lot more Star Wars looking. And yeah, they were quite a bit of work, if I'm being honest. I also gave all of them like either Republic Commando or Republic Trooper backpacks or Stormtrooper backpacks, and yeah, that was about it, and that's how we made these Blade Warriors. Also, very important, every blade's got to be armed with a sword, so I made sure all of these guys have little swords of either two-handed status or one-handed status or dagger status, sometimes both, like all kitted throughout them, and yeah, extra guns as well. If like the guy's got the sword in hand, most of those sergeant guys, like the leaders of the squads, have the sword pointing out. I made sure that they have either a rifle or pistol or something kind of holstered on their back or their belts. Just because Legion, the minis normally have that as well, so I want these minis to have that too. So I think I did pretty good representation of the actual troopers here. The final thing I'll touch on quick with these guys is there are 4 normal squads, and they all have little banners and color associated with them to differentiate them. If you were paying attention the lore part of the video much earlier on, basically these guys are a bunch of different clans of feudal warriors like fighting each other on this planet that was stranded out in the far side of the nebula, and this Jedi in running and kind of became corrupt and turned into a Sith. He united all these vying warrior clans. So I did different colors to represent each of the warrior clans for each of the squads, and now they're all unified under Servage. And yeah, that extends to the banners that you'll see later on when I get to the ship for this army. But the recon squad is the last thing that I got to talk about when it comes to the actual squads here. So we have 4 normal squads, and then we have 1 recon scout trooper squad proxy here. They're meant to be like kind of lighter in terms of armor, a little bit more mobile. And I figured since the scout troopers have 2 black dice for their pistols, these guys have dual wield pistols that are shooting 1 black dice each for the equivalent of 2 black dice. That's my little mental proxy for like why they're all dual wielding pistols and stuff, and I think it just looks really cool. They also have their swords, as already mentioned. I gave them the cloaks because like they're supposed to be a little bit more lower profile, scouty kinda, and I thought that just made sense for them. And yeah, that's about it for the Scout Recon Troopers and the actual Blade Warriors themselves. The final thing that I gotta talk about here is this big skiff transport. This is going to be the proxy for an LAAT transport vehicle for an Empire army. I found a skiff model that someone had designed online, got a print of that. Then I got some engine bits that I had, I think, from an earlier project, actually. Put them on the sides of this thing. Had some TIE fighter wings that I put up as, like, these kind of, like, little banner, solar panel, little, I don't know, just kind of cool-looking bits on the side of the ship. I think it kind of captures that Blade aesthetic. Also, if you're a 40k player, I think it's got a bit of the Dark Eldar Raider vibes going on here. But yeah, I put those TIE fighter wings on the sides of the skiff, added some samurai banners to the end pieces here, gave it a turret on the front. We added a couple of guys, Blade Warriors, to man the ship. And on the underside here, we also have a big cannon. And I figured this would be your representation for your special shots that the LAAT can take. It's either missiles or it's supposed to be like the Trade Federation tank, and it like just has like a big shell that it can load in and shoot every now and then. Can't quite remember, but I think it's a really cool representation of that. And yeah, also too, it has enough space on the top here so you can put whatever miniatures you're transporting on the LAAT actually on the skiff. And I also put a little bit of space on the very back here, so if you're not running Servage, you can kind of have him ruling over the army atop the skiff here. I think that's pretty cool. He fits in really well, and yeah, just kind of a little fun Easter egg that you can throw in. The base itself, I put in like a bunch of bones and desert bits and stuff, and some discarded metals and whatnot, plants and shrubs. I didn't talk about it too much, but a lot of those themes I was just trying to carry over to all the other bases. If you look at a lot of them, they got little discarded bones and pieces of metal and just sparse pieces of little plant shrubs throughout. So yeah, that's about it, I would say, though, for all the army here. I know, as always, I've gone on a little bit longer than I probably should have discussing my hobbies, but I hope you all found this kind of cool. I think the concept of just living in the day and age where like we can have our tabletop ideas and characters and stuff so easily conjured into the miniature form is just amazing. I really just can't believe that it's such an easy feat to accomplish nowadays, and hopefully you found this video maybe inspiring and you're planning on doing something similar yourself. If you happen to play Edge of the Empire, have your own campaign or stories to tell, maybe you already have miniatures or something to represent your characters, let me know about it in the comments, or what you thought of the army here, the stories, the lore, the miniatures, the paint jobs, whatever. Also, too, I think it's very fitting for me to say this. Happy Life Day, everyone. I hope that you're all going to be doing something to enjoy the holiday season, or at the very least, just having a chill couple of days here. Life Day only comes around once a year, and it's important to enjoy it. So I wish you all the best of luck for these coming days and all the joy that Life Day can offer.